Good morning. Thank you for coming back for day three. I want to start with a poem from Ikkyu Zenji. And what is it? The heart. It is the sound of the pine breeze there in the Sumi painting. And what is it? The heart. It is the sound of the pine breeze there in the Sumi painting. Katagiri Roshi writes about the breeze in a Sumi painting. And he says, perhaps you have seen a Sumi painting. Tiny boat, fishermen in the boat, ocean. And in the corner, just one tree. That's all. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine this? From this, you can see the huge scale of the world. Sunny days, cloudy days, and oceans. All this is expressed in different ways. You have to have the eyes to see, the ears to listen to the rhythm of the universe, the rhythm of the world in a Sumi painting. There's a wonderful verse in the Blue Cliff Record called The Unique Breeze of Reality. The unique breeze of reality. Can you see it? The unique breeze of reality. Can you hear it? Continuously, creation runs her loom and shuttle, weaving the ancient brocade, incorporating the forms of spring. As the woof goes through the warp, the weave is dense and fine. One continuous thread comes from the shuttle. How can this even be spoken of on the same day as false cause or no cause? I was thinking about our exploration to Zen mind, beginner's mind. And I was thinking that actually we have to have the eyes to see and the ears to listen and to hear to the rhythm of the universe and the rhythm of the world in this book. And sometimes, perhaps after waiting a long, long time, not necessarily a long, long time, but sometimes, we feel the world and the universe in this zendo. And when we leave, we see the zendo in this world. Suzuki Roshi said, I can't give you anything but my spirit of Zen. You have to find your own way. And this is what has been happening here during these 3 precious days. We're finding our own way, and we are listening and seeing and feeling and touching the spirit of Zen. And in this wonderful book, it's something to taste. It's something to feel in your being. As Flint said yesterday, it doesn't come through the front gate. And Katagiri Roshi went on to say, practice is about touching the heartstrings. Touching the heartstrings. He says, in other words, touching the heart is to rock your heartstrings to their ultimate state. Is to rock your heartstrings to their ultimate state. And I was thinking of that song that Leonard Cohen sings, Dance Me to the End of Love. And we know, actually, there's no end of love. But when I hear it, I'm very touched by the whole feeling of that song. And Flint said, there's no end to wonder, and there's no end to awe. It's not a project. It's something to feel our way into as we practice together. I'm just going to read you a piece from one of the sections from the book that we're going to be looking at today. Just see if you can hear the breeze in what he's saying. Dogen Zenji said, even though it is midnight, dawn is here. Even though dawn comes, it is nighttime. This kind of statement conveys the understanding transmitted from Buddha to the patriarchs, and from the patriarchs to Dogen, and to us. Nighttime and daytime are not different. The same thing is sometimes called nighttime, sometimes called daytime. They are one thing. And as Flint said last night, I think, this book is an expression of Dogen's Zen mind, which becomes an expression of Suzuki Roshi's Zen mind through 700 years of time. So we feel the 12th century here, and then we feel the 1960s, and then we listen to Flint, and we feel the 1990s, and it's all one flow, resulting in our practice here today. That we are here maintaining this practice as our ancestors have done for centuries. One of the lines in our flyer was, the most important thing is remembering the most important thing, or the most important point. And I was thinking that when Flint was talking last night, when Dogen talked about intimacy with all things, and Unmon talked about an appropriate response, each moment invites intimacy with all things and an appropriate response. They flow and they weave together in this one approach to life. So at any one moment, we can find an appropriate response to a situation, or at least know it's possible. I know there are some tennis fans in this room, Judy and Trudy. And I'm always curious when I watch somebody receiving serve, and if they're a professional player, and a serve is going to come at them around 130 miles an hour. So there's no time to think about it, but all those moments of practice and practice and practice, a response is possible. A response comes, but not from any kind of thought. Your mind has no idea where the ball is going to go, but your body and your being can find the response, or not. Today's most important point is we should find reality in each moment and in each phenomenon. This is a very important point. We should find reality in each moment and in each phenomenon. This is a very important point. And I was thinking about how we create reality. And I was thinking about, during these 3 days, what I would paint if I was going to paint these 3 days. How would I express what we've done through that medium? And you may, if you're a potter, think, how would you create a pot? Or if you're a poet, how would you create some poetry? But I was thinking, well, how would I do that? And I know there's something about the light in this room over the 3 days and how it shifts over you and the colours you wear and your beautiful faces. I'd want to include something about the sound coming up from the road into this very still place in the middle of the bustle of a city. I think I'd want to get some sound from the feet on the ground and something about the shape today of the circle as we walked, the beauty of each person's expression of themselves. I'd want to just kind of express it in some way through my heart. And in particular, I would want to include the flowers, these beautiful flowers around the room. And they've become a justice tradition through many spring seasons. And I think of us at this time of year as the Justice Peony Sangha. And I'm very drawn to these flowers today for my talk, because they're teaching us all the time. They're just accompanying us all the time. And they also have a very personal feel for me, because Trudy loves flowers, and through our long relationship, we always have beautiful flowers in the house. We have relationships with florists. We have discussions with friends, like Catherine, about flowers. They remind me of my mother. My mother loved flowers. So they resonate way back to my childhood. And I think of our dear friend Carrie Tuke, who last came to a retreat in 2014, this time, and she died, I think, in early July. And it says, a mystery lived with lightness and joy. A mystery. And during that time that she was in the final stages of her life, Trudy had peony correspondences with her. They shared pictures of peonies and sent peonies, and the peonies were doing that thing as Carrie reached the end of her life. And she's one of our ancestors. She's one of our mysteries. She is, like us, a mystery. Beautiful mystery. So at this time I always feel there's so much life, but we're also the living and dying Sangha. There's something beautiful and poignant about it. So Suzuki Roshi says, again he's quoting Dogen, although everything has Buddha nature, we love flowers, and we do not care for weeds. This is true of human nature. But that we attach to some beauty is itself Buddha's activity. We should know that. If you know that, it is all right to attach to something. If it is Buddha's attachment, that is non-attachment. Dogen says, a flower falls even though we love it. A weed grows even though we do not love it. Suzuki Roshi says, even though it is so, this is our life. And I was thinking that this feels like an invitation to really remember big mind around our preferences. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I shouldn't have preferences, should I? Because I'm practicing this path." But it feels contracted. It doesn't feel inclusive of everything that we are with our preferences. How big, as Trudy said yesterday, can we be? Can we include everything within this big mind? So he goes on to say, so in love there should be hate or non-attachment, and in hate there should be love or acceptance. Love and hate are one thing. We should not attach to love alone. We should accept hate. We should accept weeds, despite how we feel about them. If you do not care for them, do not love them. If you love them, then love them.
Can you say that again?
So in love there should be hate or non-attachment, and in hate there should be love or acceptance. Love and hate are one thing. We should not attach to love alone. We should accept hate. We should accept weeds, despite how we feel about them. If you do not care about them, do not love them. If you love them, then love them. So, going back to painting again for a few moments, and Trudy and I watch a program called Landscape Artist of the Year And the winner this year was a painter called Finn Campbell Notman. And his commission for winning the prize was to paint create a painting for the Greenwich Maritime Gallery about two Dutch artists, Willem van der Velde the Elder and Willem van der Velde the Younger. And after their early life in Netherlands, excuse me, they came to England in 1672. So we watched a film of Finn Campbell Notman going to the Netherlands to get the feel of the Netherlands in the 1600s and the conditions that the Van der Veldes painted in and the materials they used. And he went to museums and spoke to people who knew about their art, and he went out into the sea with a sketchbook and got a sense of that vast North Sea they created their landscapes in. So he immersed himself in the past in order to bring it to the future. And then he came back, and the film shows him doing the sketches, and finally his painting is unveiled at the Greenwich Gallery, and you can see how he's interpreted it, how he's felt the breeze of the 1600s. So it can go into a gallery in Greenwich. So, like Finn Campbell Notman, I'd like to take you on a journey. And I bought this book, the Tassajara Bread Book, in 1977. And it says here, RKP, Routledge Keegan Paul, £1.95. And I was the baker for our community that we were living in at the time. And this was the book, my go-to book. And the baker, the cook, was Ed Brown, who was Suzuki Roche's cook and baker. But of course, by that time, Suzuki Roche had died. He died in 1971. And so I can see all the stains in this book, and I've made a lot of the recipes. And he talked about his practice, but I had no. It was like the stars didn't. The arc of Suzuki Roche's teaching just passed me by. I concentrated on bread. So close. And we were doing another practice at the time, but it was so close. And so, 30 years later, I met Ginny Bennett, who's another of our ancestors. And I was introduced to her by Trudy, and she had brought her Komi to the UK in the year 2000. And Ginny was someone who couldn't find her way from Sheffield Station to her house in Sheffield, 3 miles away. But she could find her way into your heart. Even if, until just before she died, it was hard for her to feel the immense love that the Komi community and the Zen community felt for her. It was a struggle. She had that total commitment and holding back. Total commitment and holding back. And she was really against the idea of a head student. And also, I don't know what she would say now if she could see what was going on. We shared the same birthday. She was 5 years older than me, and she was like my older sister. And she kind of looked out for me. And I think she would say now, like, Joshie, what are you doing? What's going on? So in 2007, she invited Flint to teach with Donna in Sheffield. And Flint came as a Hakomi teacher. But during that time, it became apparent that he was a Zen priest, and he offered to do an evening of an introductory talk. And I'd been reading Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and thinking, I really would love to, have more connection with that practice. And I remember we had a conversation in a cafe, and Flint shared about Appamada. And I liked his black Chelsea boots. They were Pinkolinos. And he let me try them on. It was great. So then I went with Trudy and with a number of people here to that first evening. And wow, 30 years after having this book, the thread connected from the Tassajara bread book through Ed Brown to this practice. And then the thread has unfolded over these years since 2007 with our beautiful sanghas that we've created. So let's just go back a little bit like the artist, a little bit further to the 1960s. And there's a lot of archive material with Suzuki Roshi's talks. And one evening when Trudy and I weren't going to be at the Sangha, we suggested that they listen to a Suzuki Roshi talk. And the feedback I got was that people were like, oh, that was really hard to listen to. Not entirely, but there was a kind of, it was tricky. And we're so used to things working well most of the time, aren't we? These talks go so smoothly. But this book, and this isn't a history lesson, it's an appreciation because I don't know the history exactly, but this book was created from a series of talks that Suzuki Roshi gave to a sitting group in Los Altos, California in the 60s. And that's the kind of thing they heard. This is how it happened. This book has been so carefully created to allow us to have the authentic teaching with some adjustments so that it reads smoothly. But the actual talks that he gave, when you listen to them, they can be quite tricky. And it takes some attention, it takes some effort. But that's how it came to us. Through a group of people listening to Suzuki Roshi with his particular way of speaking English. And they're really, really worthy of our attention and respect. Because you hear the breeze. You hear the breeze. And this book has kept the breeze. But if you want to hear the first breeze, it's there. And it's very encouraging because these were small groups of people who were listening to this person and asking him questions. So they're really, really precious. So a woman called Marion Darby, who was one of the organisers of the group, taped them. Remember those old tapes? Yeah, she taped them. And then a woman called Trudy Dixon edited them. And last year, when a number of us went to Habergill for a kind of deepening practice experience with Flint, he assigned each of us an ancestor to become intimate with. So we were invited to find out about them and the context in which they worked and to feel their heart. And the person that Trudy was given was Trudy Dixon, who edited all of these talks. So I'm going to hand over to Trudy now, who's going to talk about Trudy Dixon.
In my usual way, I was initially disappointed because at that point I didn't really know who Trudy Dixon was. I was not as close a reader as Josh of the book, so it didn't immediately strike me. So she wasn't a 16th century Japanese nun. I was a little let down. But as I kind of investigated her history, she's walked with me since. So she was a young graduate student who'd studied philosophy. And when you read the histories, it's incredibly random who made Suzuki Roshi's acquaintance. Someone stayed with someone in a loft for a weekend and said, "Hey, there's this guy over here, do you want to come and hang out?" And they would go and hang out, and some of them would leave, and some of them would stay. And as a philosophy graduate, she was enamoured. And fascinatingly, one of the reports says that Suzuki Roshi very rarely talked about philosophy, but he talked about practice. And she was in the very early days of her sitting in the small group. He suddenly talked very intensely about philosophy and looked straight at her. And she was like a fish on a line. She was caught. And she was reeled in. And she had, her mother and her grandmother had died of breast cancer, the kind of cancer that's triggered by having children. She'd had one child, got cancer, had a breast removed, got pregnant, had another child, and the cancer came back. So she was only in her late 20s when she was engaged in this incredible pursuit. And the tapes were really difficult to hear. His language was really difficult. Shall I put it on? Be better? Okay, see if that's better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So she, with Marion initially, and Richard Baker sat on the tapes for a year. He was too busy to do the editing and finally handed it over to her. And she was very sick. She had 2 small children and she was really sick. She was already struggling deeply with her cancer. But she met with Suzuki Roshi and they talked, and she met with Richard Baker and they talked about crafting this. And interestingly, when Suzuki Roshi was shown a copy of the book, ostensibly of his talks, he said, "That's very interesting. That's not my book, that's my student's book." Which is so fascinating to think. It's his students, it is his words, and they have been honed and filtered through his American students' eyes and ears and hearts. Trudy Dixon never got to see the publication of the book. She died in 1969 and the book was published in 1970. And it's her name that he gave her was Winter Plum Blossom. Her name is on the altar, Winter Plum Blossom. Because as last night Jill and I laughed because the Zoom translator often has no clue what's actually happening. So she is part of our Lenny engine. She is.
We should start saying that.
She is part of our lineage, our Lenny engine. In terms of her dedication and her pursuit of this hook that had got into her. And it would be really easy to romanticize this. I believe she was a difficult woman. I believe she could be quite cool. She was from a rich family, a Wyoming horse ranch, and they said she was tough as nails. You know, she rode her cancer to the end. You know, she rode it like a wild horse, and she was not getting off. There was something about her toughness. And her children had to go and live with her parents. You know, she didn't see her children much as she was dying. She didn't see her husband much as she was dying. She was focused on her zazen. She was focused on her practice. This was the last days of her life. On July the 1st, Trudy made the difficult trip to Zen Mountain Center with her brother Jack, who had come from Wyoming to see her. She wanted him to see Tassajara and to meet Roshi. At night, she slept outside of her cabin in the moonlight. On the night of the 3rd, she shared a cup of water from Tassajara Creek with Roshi and her brother, and the next day was driven back to hospital in San Francisco. She returned again to Tassajara and Zazen. She did all of her Zazen lying down. 2 days later, and on the 8th, she left again for the hospital, where early the next morning she died. She was lying Zazen, sitting Zazen, right up until her death. And 3 days later, they had the funeral. And Suzuki Roshi gave a eulogy. He says, "Go, my disciple. You have completed your practice for this life and acquired genuine warm heart and pure and undefiled Buddha mind and joined our Sangha. All that you have done in this life and in the past life became meaningful in the light of the Buddha mind, which was found so clearly within yourself as your own. Because of your complete practice, your mind has transcended far beyond your physical sickness, and it has been taken full care of, your sickness, like a nurse." Dogen Zenji, the founder of our sect, says Buddha mind differentiates into the 3 minds: the joyful mind, the kind mind, and the magnanimous mind. The joyful mind, he says, is the joyful frame of mind, a mind of joyful mind. A man of joyful mind is contented with his lot. Even in adversity, he will see a bright light. He finds the Buddha's place in different circumstances, easy and difficult. He feels pleasure even in painful conditions and rejoices. For us, for all who have this joy of Buddha mind, The world of birth and death is the world of nirvana. The compassionate mind is the affectionate mind of parents. Parents always think of the growth of their children and welfare of their children to the neglect of their own circumstances. Our scriptures say the Buddha mind is the mind of great compassion. The magnanimous mind is the mind which is big as a mountain and as deep as ocean. A mind of magnanimous mind, a man of magnanimous mind is impartial. He walks middle way. He is never attached to any side of extreme or aspect of things. The magnanimous mind works justly and impartially. Now, you have acquired the Buddha mind and become really a disciple of the Buddha. At this point, however, I expressed my true heart, and Roshi made a great roar from his heart. Oh! At Tassajara, outside of your cabin, at first you made the trip with the moon and the stars, and then followed ever-flowing stream of Tassajara. July 11th, 1969.
Thank you, Trudy. I said at the beginning of the 3 days that, how touching and encouraging it is that all of us here have been walking this way for some time, and I can feel the tangible feel of this practice during these 3 days. And when Flynn was talking about going to Heiji, Dogen's monastery with his group in the late 90s, he talked about Matsunuga Roshi coming in to the hall and seeing the American group and saying, I had no idea what Suzuki Roshi was doing when he went to America. But now I can see what he was trying to do, what he's achieved. And as I think of that and I look at us here, I can really see the arc of Flint's work, of his love and his care for this Sangha. I can see what he was offering us in this deep practice. I'd like to finish with an appreciation of Suzuki Roshi from the Estonian poet Jan Kaplinski. And he refers to this photograph on the back of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which is also kind of paired with this one on the back of Not Always So. Shunryu Suzuki, a little Japanese, living and teaching in California, couldn't be my teacher, one of my non-teachers. A little lit match from God's matchbox. Shunryu Suzuki couldn't be my teacher, one of my non-teachers. A little lit match from God's matchbox. Sea winds soon blew out, somewhere between California and Estonia, somewhere between east and west, between somewhere and nowhere. Nobody can find out what remained of him after the wind has blown and the tide has come and gone. The white sand as smooth as before, but his smile from the back cover of Zen Mind Beginner's Mind has silently infected book after book on my shelves, and perhaps shelves themselves, and walls and wallpaper too. Thank you for these 3 days being the little lit match from God's matchbox. Thank you.